My name is Daniel Hayes, and I live in Austin, Texas. I was raised believing that family comes first, no matter what. That's what my mother taught me, and that's what I lived by for 34 years of my life. Until the day my own family tried to legally scam me. To continue listening to this beautiful and special story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from so I can include a special shout out for you in a future story. It was a Tuesday morning in October when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my father's name, which was unusual because we hadn't spoken in weeks. Daniel, we need to talk. His voice was stern, businesslike. Can you come to San Antonio this weekend? It's about your mother's property. Mom had passed away 6 months earlier after a long battle with cancer. The grief was still fresh, like an open wound that wouldn't heal. She left behind a beautiful ranch-style property in San Antonio that had been in our family for over 20 years. The house sat on 3 acres of prime Texas land, worth easily $500,000 in today's market. What about the property, Dad? I asked, already sensing something was off. Just come down. Your brother will be there too. We need to discuss some arrangement. The way he said arrangements made my stomach turn. I knew my father well enough to recognize when he was hiding something. But I agreed to come because despite everything, I still believed in family loyalty. That Friday, I drove the hour and a half from Austin to San Antonio, the familiar Texas highways stretching endlessly under the autumn sun. The mesquite trees lined the road like old friends, and the smell of barbecue from roadside joints reminded me of better times when Mom was alive and our family actually felt like a family. I arrived at the property around. The house looked exactly as Mom had left it, her garden still blooming with bluebonnets and her rocking chair on the front porch where she used to sit and watch the sunset. It broke my heart to see it all so unchanged when everything else in our lives had fallen apart. My father and brother Marcus were already there, along with 2 men in expensive suits I didn't recognize. They were sitting around Mom's old dining table, papers spread out like they were planning a military operation. These are our attorneys, Mr. Richardson and Mr. Cole. They've been helping us with the estate planning. I shook their hands, immediately uncomfortable. Estate planning? I thought we were just going to talk. Marcus, my younger brother by 3 years, avoided eye contact. That should have been my first red flag. Marcus and I had always been close, but something in his posture told me he was in on whatever was happening. Sit down, son, Dad said, gesturing to the chair across from him. We need to move quickly on this property situation. Richardson, the older of the 2 lawyers, cleared his throat. Mr. Hayes, we've prepared some documents that will streamline the process of handling your mother's estate. It's really quite simple. He slid a thick stack of papers across the table. The header read, Property Transfer and Management Agreement, in bold letters. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. Not from nervousness, but from growing anger. What exactly is this? I asked, flipping through pages of legal jargon. It's just paperwork to help your brother move faster with the property decisions, Dad said casually. You know how these things work, bureaucracy, delays, all that nonsense. This just cuts through the red tape. I started reading the document more carefully, and my blood ran cold. This wasn't just about streamlining processes. This was a complete transfer of my inheritance rights to Marcus, giving him sole decision-making power over the property, including the right to sell it without my consent. This says I'm giving up my rights to the property, I said, looking up at the 3 men staring at me. Not giving up, Mr. Cole interjected smoothly. Just reorganizing. Your brother will handle the business side, and you'll still get your share of any proceeds. It's actually better for you. Less responsibility. Same benefits. I could feel the Texas heat in that room even though the air conditioning was running. The walls seemed to close in as I realized what was happening. They were trying to steal my inheritance using legal manipulation. I need time to think about this, I said, setting the papers down. There's no time, Marcus finally spoke up, his voice strained. Daniel, we have interested buyers already. Real estate market is hot right now. If we wait, we could lose out on a great opportunity. Buyer? I stood up, the chair scraping against Mom's hardwood floors. When did we decide to sell? The silence in the room was deafening. Dad drummed his fingers on the table, a habit he'd had since I was a kid. The lawyers exchanged glances. Marcus stared at his hand. The decision's already been made, Daniel, Dad said finally. This is just about making it official. That's when I knew for certain. They had planned this whole thing without me. They were treating me like an obstacle to remove, not a family member with equal rights. I walked out of that house and sat in my truck for 20 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. The Texas sun was setting, painting the sky those brilliant oranges and pinks that Mom used to love. I could almost hear her voice telling me to stand up for myself, to not let anyone push me around, not even family. That's when I remembered the power of attorney. During Mom's final months, when the cancer was really taking its toll, she had insisted on getting all her legal affairs in order. She was always practical like that, always thinking ahead. I had driven her to the lawyer's office, sat with her while she signed document after document. Daniel, she had said that day, her voice weak but determined, I'm giving you power of attorney over my affair. If something happens to me, if your father and Marcus try to do something I wouldn't approve of, you use this. You protect what I've worked for. I had the original documents at home in Austin, locked in my safe, but more importantly, I had copies in my truck's glove compartment. I'd been carrying them around since Mom's funeral, not really knowing why. My hands shook as I pulled out the folder. There it was, durable power of attorney for property and financial affairs, signed by my mother, notarized, and filed with the Federal Registry. The document gave me complete authority over her estate decisions, including the right to approve or veto any property transfer. The power of attorney was still valid, and they had no idea I had it. I walked back into the house with the power of attorney in my hand. The four men were still sitting around the table, probably discussing how to convince me to sign their fraudulent contract. Gentlemen, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, I think you need to see this. I placed the power of attorney on the table, right on top of their transfer documents. Mr. Richardson picked it up, his face going pale as he read. He whispered something to Miss Cole, who also examined the document. This is a valid power of attorney, Mr. Richardson said slowly. Yes, it is, I replied, signed by my mother, notarized, and filed with the Federal Registry, which means any property transfer requires my approval. And I'm not approving anything. Dad's face turned red. Daniel, don't be difficult. This is about family. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family doesn't try to trick each other into signing away their inheritance. Family doesn't hire lawyers to create fake documents. Family doesn't exclude one member from major decisions. Marcus finally looked at me. Daniel, we were going to take care of you. We weren't going to screw you over. Then why didn't you just ask me directly? Why the lawyers? Why the pressure? Why the lies? The room fell silent again. The truth was hanging in the air like the humidity before a Texas thunderstorm. Mr. Richardson cleared his throat. Mr. Hayes, while this power of attorney is valid, we believe we can challenge its scope in court. Your mother's will also needs to be considered. Are you threatening me? I asked. We're informing you of your legal options, Mr. Cole said smoothly. Sometimes family disputes require judicial intervention. I couldn't believe it. They were actually threatening to take me to court over property that was rightfully mine. The audacity was fine, I said, standing up. See you in court. I walked out of that house for the second time that day, but this time I wasn't confused or hurt. I was angry, and I was ready to fight. The drive back to Austin felt like the longest hour and a half of my life. I called my own lawyer, Sarah Martinez, who had helped me with some business contracts over the years. She was a no-nonsense attorney who specialized in estate law. Daniel, this is serious, she said after I explained the situation. If they're willing to go to court over this, they probably have some kind of plan. We need to be prepared. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah and I prepared our case. We gathered all the documentation, the power of attorney, Mom's will, the property deeds, and every communication I'd had with my father and brother about the estate. The more we dug into it, the more we discovered. Marcus had been talking to real estate developers for months. He had already received preliminary offers on the property, and he stood to make a significant profit as the managing partner, under their proposed agreement. They weren't just cutting me out of the decision-making process, they were cutting me out of the profit. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Bexar County Court in San Antonio. I drove down the night before and stayed in a hotel near the courthouse. I barely slept, going over every detail of our case in my mind. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wood-paneled walls and the smell of old books and legal briefs. Judge Patricia Hernandez presided, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. My father, Marcus, and their legal team sat on one side. Sarah and I sat on the other. The divide felt symbolic. Family on one side, truth on the other. Their lawyer, Mr. Richardson, went first. He painted a picture of a stubborn son blocking reasonable business decisions, holding up the estate settlement for emotional reasons. He argued that my power of attorney was outdated and that the family needed to move forward with practical solutions. Your Honor, he said, the defendant is preventing the efficient resolution of this estate, out of spite. The proposed management agreement is fair and beneficial to all parties. It was a convincing performance, I'll give him that. But it was also complete bull, and I was about to prove it. When Sarah stood up to present our case, she didn't waste time with flowery language or emotional appeals. She went straight to the facts. Your Honor, this is not a case about efficient estate management. This is a case about attempted fraud. She placed the power of attorney on the evidence table. This document, signed by Mrs. Eleanor Hayes and properly notarized, gives my client full authority over property decisions related to his mother's estate. It is valid, it is enforceable, and it supersedes any other arrangement. Then she pulled out the real bombshell, the communications between Marcus and the real estate developers. Your Honor, we have evidence that the plaintiff has been negotiating property sales for months without informing my client. The proposed management agreement would have given the plaintiff exclusive rights to complete these pre-arranged deals, effectively stealing my client's inheritance. The judge examined the documents carefully. I could see Dad and Marcus shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Their lawyers were whispering urgently. Mr. Richardson, Judge Hernandez said, are you telling me your clients attempted to have Mr. Daniel Hayes sign a property transfer agreement without disclosing that they had already initiated sales negotiations? The negotiations were preliminary. That's not what I asked. Did your clients fail to disclose material information about the property's status? The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Judge Hernandez didn't need to deliberate long. She called for a brief recess, then returned with her ruling. This court finds that the power of attorney presented by Mr. Daniel Hayes is valid and enforceable. Furthermore, this court finds that the plaintiff's attempt to circumvent this legal authority through deceptive practices borders on fraudulent activity. She looked directly at my father and brother. Gentlemen, attempting to manipulate someone into signing legal documents while withholding material information is not just unethical, it's illegal. The fact that you tried to do this to a family member makes it even more reprehensible. The contract was nullified immediately. The court ordered that any property decisions regarding my mother's estate required my explicit written consent. Moreover, Judge Hernandez ordered Dad and Marcus to pay all court costs and attorney fees. Mr. Hayes, she said, addressing me directly, I'm sorry you had to go through this. No one should have to defend their inheritance from their own family in a court of law. As we left the courthouse, Dad tried to approach me. Daniel, let's talk about this. We can work something out. I looked at him, this man who had raised me, who had taught me to ride a bike and throw a football, who had now tried to steal from me, and I felt nothing but sadness. We had 18 months to talk about this, Dad. You chose lawyers instead. That was 3 years ago. I never returned a phone call from either of them since that day in court. I kept the property, I renovated it, turned it into a small event venue that hosts weddings and family gatherings. The irony isn't lost on me. A place where family tried to tear each other apart is now where other families celebrate their happiest moments. Every evening, I sit in Mom's old rocking chair and watch the sunset over the Texas hill country. Sometimes I think about what she would say about all this. I think she'd be proud that I stood up for myself, that I didn't let them push me around. But I also think she'd be heartbroken about how the family fell apart. The power of attorney is framed in my office now, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that sometimes the people closest to you can hurt you the most. A reminder that legal documents matter. A reminder that my mother, even in her final days, was still looking out for me. I've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about trust, respect, and honesty. When those things are gone, what's left isn't really family at all. Marcus tried to reach out once, About a year ago, he sent a letter saying he was sorry, that he needed the money for his daughter's medical bills, that Dad had convinced him it was the right thing to do. I read it, felt the familiar stab of pain, and then filed it away. Maybe someday I'll be ready to forgive them. Maybe someday we'll find a way back to being a family. But not today. Today I'm content knowing that I stood up for myself when it mattered most. I'm content knowing that Mom's legacy is protected. I'm content knowing that when they tried to force me into signing that deal, I had the power to say no. And sometimes that's enough.